Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another great episode of So You're Ready to Date. Today, we're going to bring you something really special, and I think you're really going to like it. So stick around as we talk about our intuition and what intuitive dating looks like and how to use our intuition in our dating life and just in life in general and what that even means. And if you don't feel like you're an intuitive person, we're going to break down how you can start listening to your intuition and what you can and steps that you could take and different things that you can do to put you on the right path. Because even if you don't think you're intuitive, you have an intuition. All of us has it, and it will never take us to the wrong place. So stay tuned and let's dive in.
Well, I think like kicking that off first and foremost is I very much was one of those people who thought that not necessarily that I didn't have intuition, but that maybe that mine was faulty, that maybe there was something not quite right with my intuition because I never felt like I was getting these hits that everybody else was talking about. They would talk about they just knew, or they had this sense, they had this feeling, and they knew they were supposed to do this or see that person or make that call or do this thing. And I'm like, my gut tells me when I've had too much dairy. My gut tells me when I probably should, eat or I need something to drink. It felt, very basic things, but this deeper tapped in sense to a deeper knowledge and knowing and guidance system, I really didn't feel like I was that tapped into it.
And I think that's a great point, that we all have it, but we may not be tapped into it. It's as simple as grabbing an umbrella on a sunny day, thinking that you're crazy for doing it, but knowing that you have to do it, or just grabbing your umbrella on the way out the door. And then 3 hours later, as you're out and about, it starts raining and you're glad you have it. Something as simple as that can be your intuition. And sometimes I feel really tapped into it, and other times I'm intuition. What's that? Oh, is this my logic? Is this my head telling me? Is this my heart telling me something? What does that even mean? And I find a lot of times that I'm most tapped into my intuition when I don't think and I just do.
I think a lot of times we may dismiss what is an intuition hit as I just got lucky. I just, for whatever reason, you dismiss it as this other thing that feels easier to explain. Or it's this thing of, well, it wasn't really anything I did. I just happened to see it. I grabbed the umbrella. It wasn't that big a deal. So to dismiss it as, because I think sometimes you think intuition has to be this big divine, like thunderbolt to your head, be like, this is the path you're supposed to take. This is the person you're supposed to date. But we have to start with those little itty bitty baby steps of, it can be something as simple as, what do I want to eat? And then stopping, getting quiet, and then asking yourself, what would be good? What is my gut telling me I want today? So sometimes we have to break it down to the like smallest of babyest of steps so that we can learn what our intuition says. What voice does it use? What language is it using? How does it best communicate to ourselves? Because if you, like me, we're kind of taught to ignore it because it's only going to guide you wrong. You can't really trust your gut. You have to trust your brain. You have to be logical. You have to think things through. Don't be so woo-wooey about making a decision by trusting that gut. So it's probably been buried under a lot of stories of like, I can't trust myself. That's just silly. It's going to be foolish. You can't make a decision that way. So you have to kind of peel away those layers and start to get, which is scary. And it was scary for me to get quiet. And we may think we get quiet, but we do not. I am as guilty as the next person. Quiet still scares me, but that's what it's going to take sometimes, is to get really quiet, really dialed in, and listen for what starts to bubble up.
You're right. And getting quiet is still really scary. And I oftentimes equate it with boredom. And as soon as I'm bored, what do? I pick up my phone instead of getting quiet. And getting quiet is really huge because we have so many inner voices. It's not just our intuition, but we have fear. So, what does a fear based voice sound like? versus an intuitive voice. Or we have logic. Like you said, I get really caught up in logic. I'm a very logical thinker and I see all of the steps. And so getting caught up in that logic happens often. And so what does that look like and what does that voice sound like? My mentor or my coach explains it as when you pick up the phone and your best friend is on the other end of the phone, even if you don't have caller ID or way back before cell phones, because we're old enough to remember those times, you pick up the phone and you recognize your grandma's voice, your mother's voice, your dad's voice, your brother's voice, and your best friend's voice. You recognize those without having to ask, who is this? That's the place that we want to get to inside of ourselves, so that when we hear a voice, hear a thought, hear something come up, we recognize, is this the voice of fear? Is this the voice of reason? Is this the voice of logic? Is this the voice of my intuition? So that we can clearly identify our intuitive voice and follow that going forward, because our intuition is never going to lead us the wrong way. It just isn't. That's what our intuition is for. It is our connection to something larger than we are.
And I want to kind of clarify too, don't think that just because it's not the way that you thought you were going, that it's the wrong way. Because I think there's this very clear sense of, well, my intuition is guiding me this way, but that's not where I thought I was going. That's not what I thought I was supposed to do. So this obviously can't be the right voice. So right way and a different way can be very, very different things. So giving that space to be like, what can it be without being attached to it, having to go down this path, do it in these particular steps, because it may not happen that way. And so I think the first few times you're like, it turned out okay. It actually turned out better than I thought. It didn't go the way that I was thinking it was going to go. So did I do this wrong? And that, I think, sometimes is what I get caught up in, is that there's going to be a right and a wrong way to do this, listening to your intuition. I get it. It's the people pleaser, the perfectionist in me. I'm working on it, but releasing the idea that there's going to be a right voice, a right sense, a right feeling, and just letting yourself take a few tries, practice. This is like all of the other skills we've talked about on the podcast. You're not going to be able to flip a switch and be like, whoop, perfect, awesome. I'm connected. I'm dialed in. Would love that. If you figure out how to do that, please let us know. But this is, like going to the gym. This is like learning an instrument, doing anything new for the first time. It's going to take some practice and some work to figure out your unique you and that sense of, and how you are best guided, and to see how things start to pan out. Give yourself some confidence. I think you'll have a couple where you're like, oh, okay, I'm seeing how this is working out. This actually worked out in my best interest. I can start to trust this a little bit more, because you'll have proof.
Right. And you can practice with your existing relationships, but you don't even have to practice it with other people and trusting your gut there. You can practice it with, do I have a hint in the back of my head saying to grab my umbrella? Should I grab an extra pair of shoes? Should I stop at the grocery store on my way home? Should I turn right instead of left here to get to a place that I'm going a different way? Just start trusting those little nudges, those little voices. And that's a great way to practice without risk, right? Without risk and without jeopardizing anything that you've got going on currently. It gives you an opportunity to practice using that intuition. And from there, you can start to apply it into the relationships in your life, whether that be friends and family, or with your significant other, or choosing who to date, or who to let in your home, or who you're going to meet up with, any of those types of things, the types of activities that you're going to attend, whether or not you should go to an event. A lot of times, for me, it comes down to events too. And I'm supremely an introvert. I do very well at socializing with people, but I'm an introvert. And so a lot of times I'll say yes to an event, or my gut will say that I want to go. And then 5 minutes before, 10 minutes before, the day before, whatever that is, I suddenly get this feeling of, oh, maybe I shouldn't go. That's my intuition telling me I shouldn't go. But that's the fear, that's the discomfort, that is all of the other voices that I have inside of me. My intuition said a week ago that I needed to RSVP for an event.
Ah, the dread. I made plans when I was in a better space, and now I'm in the space where I just want to be home on the couch, right?
Yes. Does that happen to anybody else? I thought that was just me.
But that's a beautiful example of letting your fear kind of railroad that voice that you felt so clear, like you said a week ago. And so that's when you have to stop and be like, okay, is there really something that feels off? Or have I just had a really long day and I'm exhausted? Or is this just a matter of the weather turned a little bit worse than I was expecting? I don't want to be outside. So there could be other factors to it. And maybe it is an intuitive hit, but to stop and question yourself, if it's just a matter of, I don't know, now I feel like I don't want to do it. I'm not going to know anybody. It's not going to be fun. I would encourage you to at least try, go for 5 or 10 minutes. If it ends up being just a complete waste of time, you're like, okay, now I know. When that nudge and when that feeling comes over me again, I'll pay a little bit more attention to it, ask myself some questions, and then from there make the decision that is best for me.
Yes. And I think back to the time when I was first getting separated and I was looking to branch out. And we won't go into the whole story right now, but inviting people into my home, there was a certain method that I didn't mean to do, and it ended up happening. And I had somebody request to come over and visit and do some stuff. And everybody that I asked, my parents, my coworkers, every friend that I had, they all said, no. They looked at me like I was crazy and said, what are you, nuts? No, don't do that. And on the spur of the moment, without even thinking about it, I pushed the yes button and said, sure, come on over. Let's try this. And it was one of the greatest experiences that I had in a very long time, but it was a really great experience. There was a lot of growth in that experience, but that was trusting my intuition, regardless of the fear. That was my fear voice saying no, my friends saying no, my family saying no, everybody else saying no in my life, and just trusting my gut and knowing that I asked for something. It was being brought to my front door, and all I had to do was open the door and let it in. And by doing that and putting that fear aside, I was able to expand my personal growth and personal development. I was able to expand myself so much and so fully because of this. Whereas if I had let that fear talk to me, no way. And I would still be stuck where I was 5 years ago.
Exactly. I think that's learning. It's good to have like input from other people and to have those people that you can trust. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out what is best for you and know what those hits mean and know that it'll all probably work out in the wash. There's a reason that it was feeling this strong. There was a reason that it was kind of feeling that push, that pull. So I'll go ahead and share a little story time here because this is probably the most direct and biggest like intuitive hit I've had in my entire life. Been working a lot. I get really heart-centered, and that's beautiful and wonderful. But your gut has a lot of, information for you as well. And so I've been doing a lot of work to tap back into my intuition, tap into that like sacral chakra, all of that kind of stuff, because I knew that's where the good stuff is. That's where a lot of that good stuff bubbles up from. So I needed to take some time and really work on that. So doing the meditations, doing the work, doing the movement, all of that I needed to do. And I had deleted the dating apps, I think back in like August, something like that, because I was done. I was settling for my situationship. I was like, that's what it's going to be. This is as good as it's going to get for right now. I'm just going to work on myself and have fun and do my own thing. And like 2 weeks ago, I still remember this feeling in my stomach, this like big, expansive, just like light in my gut that was like, you need to re-download Hinge and you need to do it tonight. I'm like, this is just dumb. There's just no way that my intuition is telling me to get back on a dating app. But I just would not go away. It was just very clear and just very bright is the best way I can describe it. It was like, just do it. So I'm like, fine. I re-download the app. I have 6 matches like immediately. And at the top is this one guy. I'm like, I looked through his profile. Everything looked kind of cool. It was, I'm like, okay. So I check out the others. I actually matched with and sent a prompt to a couple of other guys, but I hadn't matched with that first guy yet. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know when these likes came in. That was like in my head. Like, what if they liked me like 6 months ago and now I'm replying back because I just finally see it. But I could not stop thinking about this particular guy. So I'm like, just go back, just do it. So I went back, matched. We did a little bit of chatting, exchanged numbers. I got very frustrated with him to the point of like being angry and just being done because I felt like he wasn't reading my messages. But I'm like, nope, we're going to sit with this. We're going to, everything else was fine. Once we kind of cleared things up, things kind of got back on track. And we have known each other a week and we've been on 4 dates, which is like a record for me in this like span of time. And she's back in the summer had made a list of like 60 things I'm looking for in a partner, things I'm looking for like right now, things I would like, things that might happen in the future, just anything and everything I could think of. And then I went back to my list and I start reading through it. Is he checking all of the boxes? No, but the vast majority of boxes that he is checking freaked me out. Because I was pretty sure I was making the list of a unicorn. I was making the list of this person that couldn't possibly exist, because then how could I possibly get that person? And then to meet and for us to talk and for him to say, for the last 2 months, I have been putting out in the universe to find somebody like you, and I found you. If that doesn't take
powerful statement right there alone.
If that doesn't like take the brat wind out of your sails and just be like, oh, so I guess somebody was actively hoping to find somebody like me, just like I was hoping to find somebody like them. And the conversations that we had with like pretty deep, pretty quick, and we are looking for basically the same things. And he keeps saying, he's not from the US, so English is not his first language. And so he says, so much of what you say is what I want to say, but I just can't find the words. And to have somebody who listens to me and sees me and like looks me in the eye and just wants to look me in the eye because he likes me that much is a feeling that I have not had in a very long time. And it was all because I had this like warmth and brightness in my gut that says, you got to do this. And I listened, and I very well may have found somebody who I have been looking high and low for.
There are so many great things about that story. Number one, you trusted your gut, the intuition. But I want to refer back to several things as we're talking about this dating process. You made a list. Yeah. You picked your unicorn out of the herd. You decided exactly what you were looking for. You made a list. Then you trusted your intuition, but you also let yourself fail a few times because you got really clear on what you didn't want, right? You were settling for a situationship, but you got really clear on what you didn't want and really clear on what you did want. So going back to the list, that's what making a list does. But sometimes we're not, as humans and as people in relationships, and if we're not our best selves and we're not as confident as we could be at certain points in time, we still don't believe that we really want that, or that really could exist. Or we say, okay, this is what I want, but I'll be happy with something else. And so this helped you get clear, and you were willing to go through that, as challenging as that might have been. You were willing to go through that. And then to come out the other side of it and to do this and to trust this, you got back on those dating apps, but you were patient. You waited for the right time, and you didn't settle in the meantime. You got your situationship, but you didn't settle there, and you were still waiting, and you still knew that wasn't the end, and you were still holding out for that, and now you have found it. And so there's so much to be learned for that, and that could take years or it could take months, depending on where you're at in your personal development journey. And there is no difference in shortening it from years down to months or weeks. But you were able to do that because you've taken all of the stuff that we're talking about and applied it expertly.
Well, thank you. And I think there's a very real difference between, and desperation feels like such a negative word, but that's really what a lot of like my dating on the apps was, like this desperation of like, I need to find somebody. I want to find somebody. I got to keep going on all these dates because it's a numbers game, right? And that's how I burned myself out. That's how I got to this point of why am I attracting walking red flags? Because I was being a walking red flag myself in my own unique way, in wanting just somebody so that I could say that I have somebody, as opposed to waiting for what I truly wanted and deserved. When it comes to that list, I was not checking it all the time. Quite frankly, the point of it was to write it down and forget it. It wasn't to bring it out at every date and be like, do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? No, that was not the point. The point was for me to get very clear, for me to put it down, and so that the universe knew that these were the things that I was looking for and wanting, but to not make it homework for the other person. And he had asked me about them. So I told him a couple, but I'm like, I'm not telling you a bunch of them because I don't need you to change yourself into these. If you eventually get to that place, maybe that's fine. But maybe as we go on this journey, I'll figure out that we need to go a different way. And we need to do different things to grow as a couple, to grow as individuals, to achieve the goals that we're looking for. So don't let it be this be all end all. This is not the right thing if they're not hitting all 60 of them. I couldn't hit all 60 of them. And it's my freaking list. But I think it's more about, like what you said, getting into that energy of this is what I want, and not that it's, you need to know what you don't want. I get that. But there's a different energy about you and how you present yourself when you know very clearly what you do want, what your standards are, because I have high standards. And I'm done apologizing for the fact that if you don't know how to cook, clean, and do basic necessities, those are the bare minimums of you being a human. It has nothing to do with our relationship. But if you want to be in a relationship, we have some standards we can discuss. And being very clear on, this is what I need for a successful relationship. What do you need for a successful relationship? And there's a very different energy about that than if it's like, I don't want, no tattoos, no piercings, no colored hair, no liberals. That is a very different energy. And you're going to attract not the quality and caliber of people who you want. Or maybe you are. Maybe you are attracting exactly who you want. But I knew what, I wanted a very specific and different type of man and different type of relationship. And I had to first embody and be the partner that I really wanted in a relationship. And that is no easy feat in and of itself either.
That's true. To show up and be the partner that you are looking for. And it's interesting because we do hold ourselves to a much higher standard than we hold other people to. Typically, right? We're harder on ourselves than we're our own worst critic, all of those things. But when it comes to a relationship, we want something in a partner that we don't embody, or that we don't recognize that we don't embody right at that point in time. And we're expecting a lot of times, not always, but we're expecting something that we're not putting into a relationship. And the best way to attract and find the partner that you're looking for is to show up as the partner that you're looking for. And so I really like that statement too, as you're going on this journey. A lot of really great gold nuggets to pull out of there personally, and for anybody else that's out there listening.
So there is a way to use your intuition in dating. Is it always going to be 100%? No. But I think it was a lot of practice of, you know, getting quiet and finding those moments. And then here's the part that nobody likes to hear. You're going to have to take action. I think sometimes that is the part of like, yeah, it may mean cutting off that relationship. It may mean, you know, having a conversation that's difficult, that's not pleasant. But this is what we have to do as adults, right? Or as, you know, like good people, is to have these, hopefully, you know, remember those difficult conversations are what, 9 seconds tops. That's the hardest part. So but it's about, then you have to take that next step. You have to take that action. It was, yeah, taking, sometimes it's a matter of closing your eyes and hitting send, or, you know, Angie and I have done this for each other. I'm going to send you this. I need you to hit send or publish or do something on this, because I know it's good and I know it needs to go out, but I just don't have it in me yet. So yeah, it's going to be that difficult next step, and kind of trusting, you take that step and you trust that the floor is going to be there.
This episode, I seriously, it's so juicy because you just said another great gold nugget that I think we could pull out of this. And I know we're talking about intuition, but you're touching on so many great topics that I just don't want people to miss. So I'm going to go reiterate it. If you have a problem pushing send, or if you have a problem pushing the call button on the phone, it's okay to have somebody else push the buttons. You're writing it. And a lot of times it's easier to let our friends see something, or to let our friends do it. And our friends are not emotionally attached to that. So they can help you take that step to get past that first thing. Like Lisa, like you said, we've done that for each other. I've done that for other friends, is just push the send button after everything's been typed up, or just push the email button or the call button for somebody to pick up the phone. And if we know that something needs to be done and we're trusting our gut and that intuition, but we're really afraid of those first 9 seconds, it's really, you know, have somebody else help you. And there is nothing wrong with that. That's what's going to get you over that hump. That's what's going to help you put your fear in the back seat and take that step. You do it. There is nothing wrong with that.
Because it's not cheating. Because there's this idea that, well, it's not going to count, but it does. Just because you didn't do that very last step doesn't mean you didn't do every step up into it. You still knew that you had to do this. You still trusted your gut. You still trusted that message. Just because you had help means good. Congratulations. You have people you can ask for help, and you have people who will help you, because that's a hard thing in and of itself for a lot of people to ask others for help. So it's still telling the universe that, yeah, they got the message. They knew what they were supposed to do, and they took the steps that I was hoping they were going to take.
Yeah, just find that first step. You can get all the way to the top of Mount Everest with those baby steps, right? Again, quoting my coach, but taking that first step, taking whatever that next step is, no matter how tiny it is going to move you just a little bit forward. And as you're walking up the hill, as you're walking up the mountain, every step is going to open up more and more visibility, and you're going to be able to see more and more. And every step is a growth step. And as you expand your comfort zone, and as you expand outside your comfort zone, that's going to open up more and more for you. So I think one of the biggest takeaways there were so many, but I'm going to go back to the intuition and a takeaway there. If you're looking for a place to start, get quiet. Set your alarm for 5 minutes and just sit in silence for 5 minutes. That's all it takes. And if 5 minutes is too much, start with 1 minute. It's okay to just start with 1 minute a day to just get quiet. But that is the first step in trusting your intuition. And your intuition is your greatest asset in helping you with anything in your life. So highly recommend that you just get quiet, starting with a minute a day, if that's where you're at.
Well, and for those of you who are, you know, the thought of sitting still and sitting quiet for a minute bothers you, one of the things that I had done was like find my daily activity. So maybe it's when you're making breakfast and you usually have like a podcast on or the TV on or the radio on, doing that quietly. Making your coffee and letting it be quiet. Washing your face, brushing your teeth, finding like daily habits that you already have. And if you know that you constantly have like music on or some noise on in the background, or you're scrolling your phone, to put that down and be present in the activity and let yourself have that time to, okay, I'm doing something that I've done a million times. I don't have to think of it. And sometimes that's just enough for your brain to be like, oh, okay, we're going to chill out here for just a little bit, and then work into that space of like, maybe it's a minute before you go to bed where you close your eyes and you just let yourself be quiet. So stop thinking that's going to be big and crazy and expansive. You don't have to sit on the floor with your legs crossed. You can sit in the bathtub if that works. But there are ways that you can find these little bits of minutes throughout your day to practice being quiet and listening for that push, that hint, that nudge that is your own little voice.
And if your intuition is telling you that you have a topic you want us to talk about, feel free to shoot us an email at soyou'readytodate@gmail.com. We would love to address any topics that you have or any questions that you have about love, dating, or relationships in general. And we will talk to you next week.